Um,
Yes, I mean, it's remained constant pretty much throughout until the LPRs were added. Um, and again, we talked about how that caused the disparity and why. And when we removed those, again, it went down significantly, even though our population rate went down.
Gail, is this done exclusively by the state of Missouri? Is this a Missouri or is this a national?
No, it's the state of Missouri, and the data is collected by the state by through all of the police departments and municipal, state, county police departments, and it's applied equally throughout.
Do you have any idea why they went to the ACS? Because the weirdest thing is next year you're going to have a new decennial or diennial, however we say that, with the new census data. And so this is very bizarre that they would interject that in 1 year. It just doesn't make sense to me.
I didn't speak to the AG's office personally, but Captain Perks and Greg is on now did talk with the attorneys in the office that's responsible for that, and he really couldn't give us an explanation as to why they changed this year, because he did say next year we'll go back to the 2020 census.
mm-hmm.
Then maybe we should
Maybe
we should just use our own based on the regular census numbers.
Well, I think an accurate figure and something that would give us a much more accurate reading, like I said, would be the spatial relationship, which is we take the population within 10 miles radius of us, take a look at what that percentage is, because we have those arterial roads that go through, and we have thousands of people traveling through every day and on the highway. And I think if we did that, we get a much more accurate picture of it. The number's still going a little high because there are some things in there like socioeconomic factors that play on it, but I think it'd give us a much more accurate picture. But the problem is that that's not what's going to happen. I mean, June 1st is going to happen. This report's going to be public. It'll be in the paper. People are going to see it, and they're going to have a very serious concern of why is Webster Groves' number so high. Yeah, I'm sorry, Scott, go ahead.
No, it's fine. Two things. What is the resistance to doing what you just said? Why is that there? Do they? And number two, did they break it down into different kinds of stops? And is there any other way that the data is being analyzed just besides stops in general?
There is. I don't get that in the draft report. We had it in last year's report. They've broken it down, and as you saw in the one table, they didn't start keeping the resident-only population until 2018. And again, I think that's a much better barometer as well. But one of the things that they're breaking down now is whether it's routine patrol traffic stops, a dedicated enforcement stop, or special detail stops. So, and last year, we averaged about 20% in each of those areas. On the routine patrol stops, even though, as I've said before, the officers, the majority of the time, can't tell the race, sex of the driver. But on those stops, you really don't know where the population is coming from or what kind of enforcement's being made without getting real deep into the weeds, and that's difficult to do. But on the special enforcement and the details, especially on the highway details, and that's the MoDOT grant, 95% of this, those are 90% radar tickets, and the radar gun can't tell what's going on with the driver, again, race, sex, age, anything like that. So when our barometer, we look at those, and all those are at about the 20% rate for minority stops, that would tell me that the spatial relationship of the population around us is about that rate, because what you're getting is the dedicated enforcement and the special enforcement. You know that the officers 95 to 99% of the time aren't able to tell the race or sex, age of the driver because they're using a radar gun.
So the disparity index is equal across all those types?
Yes, it's equal across all those types. And we'll get that again this year. I would expect it'll probably be about the same, but again, that I don't know yet. The draft report that we get, which came out last week, doesn't have all the data on it.
So Chief Curtis, kind of thinking forward and being somebody who has their data public, with no controls over it, what kind of response, have you thought about giving the public when that becomes public Do you have anything that maybe you can put out there beforehand, or what kind of dialogue are you having about that?
Well, the first thing I wanted to do was make the council aware of it, which I did last Tuesday.
Mhm.
There was going to be a increase in it. But then I also
Mhm.
wanted to bring it to the board so that you all be aware of it. I'm sure that you all have some contacts and talk to people, so that will be helpful.
Mhm.
But we've been working with Jenny Starkey. When it comes out, we have basically what I showed you there, but also more of a narrative that I think is maybe easier for people to understand of how it's happened and why it's happened. Especially this year, like I said, I'm totally befuddled as to why the state went from using the decennial census to a different data method, because that's not just us. I'm not sure what other departments it's going to affect, but it has to affect a lot of them, because again, the 28% drop, it's just, I can't, realistically, that's just something that doesn't happen in 1 year.
Chief, I'll be curious to see how this impacts a lot of the other departments in this area, because as you know, the AG's office has, what shall I say, some anti-St. Louis bias.
Well, it's been the formula is used throughout the state. So I can't say that it's unfair in terms of targeting us or targeting St. Louis area even, but um, it's just kind of a strange choice to use a
For
different
1
data
year.
method in 1 year, and then next year they're going to go back to what they've used the 19 previous years. And as I said before, I'm hoping that with the board and with some help in terms of the engagement, talking to different groups, that we can get an understanding that really the spatial relationship in population is a much more accurate barometer of the percentage of stops. And then what we're looking at when we look at something like a 3.82% population, even if that's accurate, that's residents in Webster Groves. Um, I'm also hoping that people understand when you stop one Black resident every 10 days, less than 11 days, that in itself should show that we're not targeting Black drivers. It's not something that's occurring. And again, I can guarantee you that our policies, our procedures, our cultures, our supervisors, everything works strongly against routine profiling. I can't tell you that it never happens with an individual isolated, but I'm just very confident in being able to say that it's not something that's routine practice by any of our officers.
Is there any way to tell if the stops are concentrated into one area of Webster Groves roads?
It's generally going to, in the Webster Groves residential areas, it's generally going to be scattered. I can look at it and you can get that data actually. It tells you residential streets, the highway, interstates, and county roads. So you can get a little bit of a feel from that when all the data comes out,
Yeah.
which I don't have right now. But it's going to be pretty scattered in terms of the enforcement throughout the city. We do look at the data. We try and look at it monthly. It's kind of a difficult thing to do because officers riding in one area are going to be stopping more of one population than another. And so, you need to be careful about individual officers, but we do take a look at that. And as I said, we haven't seen anything. I haven't seen anything that would indicate that our officers are doing any type of profiling on a routine basis.
Do we know, Chief, how our numbers compare to other municipalities? Like are other municipalities, not that it's good or bad, just curious.
I don't know for this year. I mean, I know in past years, as an example, Rock Hill, which has a much larger Black population, I think they were under 2 last year. Brentwood was probably something like, again, don't quote me on this, but I think I'm pretty close. It was like 8. Shrewsbury was something like 9 or 10. I think Clayton was probably close to 3, which is, that's another thing there. I mean, I worked in Clayton for well over 20 years. And one of the things that they get in the disparity rate that you look at residential population, that includes the inmate population of the St. Louis County facility. So that skews it as well. Things like that go into it that really, you don't always get an accurate barometer of what the rate is.
Any more questions? Okay, thank you, Chief Curtis.
All right, thank you. And when the report does come out, I'll try and get a little more data from the total report, get the information to you all to take a look at. And if you have any questions, you're certainly welcome to, shoot them back to me.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, let's dive into some of the material that we covered in our fabulous retreat Katie and Angela put on. It was best thing I've been to in a long time. And so we looked at the 5 questions that was put out by the New York City School of Law Policing Project. And for those who weren't here, I'll just kind of go over it quickly to refresh our minds. And let's kind of take a deep dive into some of that information, this being also the anniversary of the very historic case with George Floyd. This is, I think it's important that we are meeting on a day like today and talking about these things. So I guess the overarching question is, what can we do with this information and how can we take it from being on paper to action? So what are the goals of engagement? And some thoughts that came up is that there is some authenticity, that it builds relationships, builds trust with all members of the community, and that emphasis on all. And when the police show up, is there relief or fear? Very important statement there. With whom do we want to engage? Neighborhoods, organizations, schools. Let's start with the Black and Brown community where the relationship is most fractured. And someone asked, where are most of the calls when the police are or come to a residence or to an incident? What steps are being taken to educate the audience so it can engage in a meaningful way? So we have our surveys, the Friday pages, Webster Kirkwood Times was another option. But first, it was said that we need to create a mission, vision, values for this board. What steps are being taken to use so those who choose to engage are actually being heard? The survey needs to go out to more diverse groups of individuals, maybe put the survey in the Friday pages. And also the last question, what will be done to respond to input in order to show respect for those who participated? And it's to make discussion of the survey responses, especially the comments, a regular part of the PCEB monthly meeting agenda. So listening to that, has anybody had any further thought on, or has something gone into action already? Did we get it into the, I know there's an effort to put it into the Friday pages. I got it, but I didn't look carefully.
It was not in this most
Okay.
recent edition.
We'll work on getting it in this Friday.
Got it.
Right. Chief Curtis, can you provide information as to, where are the most calls? I mean, you had indicated, in just recently and tonight that it's kind of scattered, would the number of calls with the calls where the police are called to through, I guess, the dispatch center, are they concentrated in any particular area? Are they scattered? Are they?
Anecdotally, I don't believe they're concentrated or focused in one area to any great degree. I can get those numbers, but it will take a little while. We have to break it down. The areas are divided into codes, so I can get close to different sectors, portions of the city. So if you like that, I can get it. It would take a couple, 3 days to get that compiled though.
Would it be possible to know sort of a category of the nature of the call?
Yes, same thing though. It'll take a while to get the information. And to be quite honest, there's going, for instance, we last year we were down a little bit. I think for 2020 we probably only had 20 5,000, but routinely it's been pretty consistent over the last 20 years. We average between 29 and 31,000 calls per year. So when you start breaking that down, it's going to be a lot of information.
Oh,
Are you interested in like a 5-year average or 2-year average, or what is it that would be helpful?
I don't know. I mean, I guess I would be interested over time, do the numbers fluctuate over time? And then you can look at particular years and see if, I think last year things were so weird. That would be one anomaly in the numbers, but are the numbers shifting over time, or are the locations shifting over time? That kind of thing.
Last year is probably going to be a one-off, and a lot of the data and information. We can do a 3-year average over the last years and try and compile that in a way that makes sense. And I'll get that to you as soon as possible. That, especially when they add the offense category, that's going to take a little while to get, even though we've got it computerized. It's still difficult to pull it out and extract all the information and get it compiled in a way that you can kind of take a look at it and understand what's going on with it. There is, fortunately, we're a bedroom community. We don't deal with a lot of crime, so you're not going to see a lot of criminal incidents, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
What you will see, and the reason that it'll take a little while, and why we need to be careful about it, is you'll see domestic disputes, peace disturbance, those loud music, those kind of things. So we can parse those out and put them in groups. So we got to be careful about addresses and names and those kind of things.
Yeah.
A lot of catalytic converters this year.
Unfortunately, that is true, and we are not the only community dealing with that.
Chief Curtis, do you think you could have that maybe for our next meeting and present it?
Yes, that should be no problem. I can do that. I'll try and get that to you well before the next meeting.
So kind of asking the police officers who are here, I see we have Perks, McCoy, and Bell here. So kind of thinking about those first two areas, and maybe if you can comment on it, or if you have any thoughts on it. We said that for our goals for engagement between the police and the community is that it's authentic, and that it builds authentic relationships, builds trust. And I guess that question was, when the police show up, is there relief or fear? That would make, that depends on why they're showing up, I guess. And then with whom do we want to engage? Neighborhoods, organizations, and schools. I think that's kind of in Fred and Jillian's corner too. Start with the Black and Brown communities where the relationships are most fractured. So Chief and our officers, what kind of thoughts do you have about that? Like, how can we put that into action, or where is that already in action? And we can capitalize on some of that.
I'd like to let Greg and Jillian and even Fred offer their opinion on some of that, and where we are in some of it already, and where they think we should be able to go. If you all would want to go ahead and chime in.
They took a break.
I'm afraid they might have. But
Chief, I'm here. I apologize. I was dealing with my 2-year-old. So what was the question?
So we're kind of looking at what engagement means to this board, engagement between the police and the community, and with whom do we want to engage. So some thoughts we had at our retreat was that, first of all, it has to be authentic. It has to build relationships, build trust. And then, when the police show up, is there relief or fear? And then with whom do we want to engage? Neighborhoods, organizations, schools. We want to start with the Black and Brown communities, where the relationship right now nationally is a little fractured. So some of that might already be in place where we can capitalize on that, but what kind of thoughts do you have?
Well, I agree with all of that. You know, I think starting with your young people, I think that that's where your building ground is, you know. So I think starting in the schools and starting that relationship and an open dialogue and keeping it open, you know. I think that keeping a conversation going is one of the most important things when you're talking to individuals of any kind, you know. So I think that's very important to do, and I think that hitting the younger community head on first would probably be where I would start. You know, I can say we have, you know, SRO Cameron McCullough, who's at Hickson. And, you know, when he was put in that position, he has told me several times, you know, I love it because I get to talk to the kids and I get to, you know, kind of shoot the crap with them and stuff like that. But he really likes it because he feels like he can just sit down and be real and talk to these kids and make a difference in these kids' lives, you know. And it starts with young people. And you know, the fear of police officers, we want to diminish that. If that's there, we want to diminish it in any way that we can. And so I think, you know, starting with him at Hickson, he's done a great job with doing that. You know, he's built a lot of relationships. You know, since I've become his supervisor, I probably go to Hickson. I would try to go there every 2 weeks, at least, just to walk around so the kids can see my face and see that, you know, police officers aren't just men, they are women as well. You know, and I want to walk around and get to know these kiddos and see who's in the community. And then in the high school too, you know, we have Bob Grave, who he does a great job with trying to build relationships, get to know these kids, get to see what's going on in the high school. And, you know, I try to get up there as often as I can in the high school as well. And it's important. It's important to build those relationships. So I think starting with the younger generation of kiddos is your foundation and your building block.
I don't, I hate to keep using COVID as an excuse, but it was a setback for us. I don't know if Fred said he was beyond, but he had his daughter tonight, so he may be occupied. But we've really been trying to do that. One of the things that's restricted us is that Fred had made some inroads and meeting with organizations. When you were talking about the Black and Brown community with the North Webster Coalition, he's been interacting with the Webster Rock Hill Ministries. I mean, those are the kind of things that we're trying to make inroads on, and I think we're doing that. With as Jillian said, with the school resource officers, they've been able to be more active because school has been in session for most of this year. So I think we've always had a good relationship there. I think one of the places we're trying to focus on now is outside of that and into the community. And I honestly believe that we have there's room for improvement, and we want to do better. But I think we have a pretty good relationship with North Webster and with the North Webster Coalition. Next meeting, I'll try and have a couple of our COP officers on there. That's the area that they ride. They are familiar with a lot of the residents up there. They get out of the car, they patrol. They're in Ivy Crockett Park. So I think maybe it'd be good to get some input from them. But again, like I said, we've made some inroads where we've got some work to do. We know that. But I think we're doing the right things and headed in the right direction there. But certainly, if you all have some suggestions on some other things that we can do, the meeting we had with the Webster University students. So it's one of the things we'll look at next year. Is for orientation. We'll try and get Fred and Jillian at an orientation to help with some of the students there. And then that's probably, to be honest, that's probably the area where I had the most concern that maybe we are disassociated from them a little bit. But like I said, I think we have a pretty good relationship with most of the community. I think we have a very good relationship with the school district and the students in the school district. Greg, did you want to add something? I'm sorry.
Yeah, Chief. Sorry, I was dealing with a little dinner catastrophe going on, but I just wanted to say that the COVID kind of hit us a little bit, but you touched on it, and really, Cynthia, the idea is to reach the entire community. It's everybody. It's the school districts, it's the business districts, it's the individual residents that reside in Webster. It's everybody. And so I think we're doing a good job at that. And hopefully, with the county and the country opening back up, we can get back to that plan of attending meetings. I know Fred and I, before COVID, were attending all kinds of meetings together, North Webster, the AID meetings, et cetera. So I think we're on track. I think we need to keep pushing forward with those things and build on it. So that's what I was going to say, Chief, until you jumped in on me.
I've got a kind of a thought on the school resource officers, which I think are great. And it probably applies to the other like outreach officers, like Detective Bell, and that too. And I feel like I've kind of heard a little bit from my kids as they're going through school. I mean, the school resource officers are kind of like they stay there. So the kids get to know them. That's great. But whenever they get pulled over at 16, it's a different officer. So they basically get to know the one officer, or, you know, the couple officers, like if they were Hickson in there. But I feel like if there's a way to rotate like all of the police officers in through the schools, like on a really more regular basis, so that the kids grow up kind of getting to know a host of the officers that could possibly pull them over for, you know, missing tags or broken headlight or something more serious, so that they would actually kind of recognize the people that they're actually interacting with in a potentially scary situation. Because at school, they just know the guy's there. They're like, hey, you know, Officer Bob or whatever. But when it comes right down to actual like interactions in a real life thing, it'd be nice to kind of have more familiar faces.
Gina, I think that's not a bad idea. My thought on that would be what we may be able to do and take a look at doing is to rotate some people in and out with the SROs. The SRO really is a specialty assignment. It requires a skill set that some officers really are not. I don't say that they don't have it, but are not as good at it as they should be, as we would like them to be. So we don't put people in the schools unless they have that skill set, unless they have that training. But I agree with you. It's something that we can maybe take a look at would be having someone partner up with them at different times during the school year to see other officers in the school along with them. So that's something we can definitely take a look at doing.
Maybe that rotation too would help them build that skill set as a mentorship in a sense with those community people.
I agree, Scott. It may sound like a kind of a harsh thing to say though, but a lot of the officers really are not. It's not something that they're excited about doing. So, like I said, we want to be careful about who we put in the schools, and we don't put somebody in there that doesn't want to be there. But if we rotate people in and out, the patrol officers to kind of partner with the SROs on a temporary basis, I think that, like you said, I think that would be helpful.
I had a thought when Jillian was speaking. You know, I hate to add another survey, but it might be later on or something that we can think about, you know, with the positive things that are happening through the SRO and through Fred and Jillian, Greg. I wonder what the narrative is from those young people. What is it that they are experiencing? Because it's not only about saying, do this, you officers here, but it's also about let's highlight also and capitalize the good things that are happening out there, because that builds trust as well. That also tells a different story. So, you know, we want to make sure we give the full story, the things that are happening. And I'd just be curious because I know how my kids respond when the SRO comes into the building every day. It's like, you're right, they have a certain skill set, and it's like Santa just walked in, and and they crawl all over him. And so, I think that it would be interesting to hear what some of these young people at Hickson and the high school are experiencing, so that all of the officers know that that's the kind of engagement that kids need from time to time. Anything else on that? Okay. Let's move on just for now. So we did some goal setting, some short-term and long-term goals. And, with goal setting, it's always important to try to prioritize them. So we can attempt that tonight. It may not be just yet. They may not be fleshed out enough yet, but, what can we do now? What can we do this month? And what can we do in a couple of months? So one of the short-term goals that came up was to use the feedback data in meeting discussions like this. I didn't prepare any, so maybe the next meeting we can do that. There's also recreating the Wesley Bell role play with students. He did a piece on role playing with some students, where the students became the officers and the officers became the resident. There's also Wesley Bell has some case reviews, what took place, how and why, and it sounds a little bit like what Dale may bring a little bit of that to us. And then one of the bigger pieces was sponsor an event in the park with the community and police, like a fun field day event, tug of war, etc., at Ivory Crockett Park in the fall of 2021. And then entertain board collaboration with other boards. So that kind of might tie in with that Ivory Crockett piece. Can we connect with the Parks and Rec and try to create something interesting? So what kinds of thoughts do you have on that? Can we move those into some action items? Yes, Kevin.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear from the officers on the Wesley Bell sponsoring the St. Louis, I think it was St. Louis County Police Department with the Normandy School District, and I can't remember the other school district, where they did some role playing, live role playing versus the role playing that you all do in the training area down in the basement of the police department. But from what I understand, it was a very positive event, and the kids actually had a really good time, and it kind of opened their eyes as to what the police have to, what happens and all the distractions that are happening around them, and how fast things can change. And I think a lot of the kids were really surprised on what you have to do as police officers. So I don't know what you feel about that. I know Chief Curtis would have to go through the superintendent or the school board to get something like that approved. But do you think that would be a positive event?
So I will start with that. I think that would be awesome. I think that kind of thing right there is exactly what we should be doing. I think that would open eyes, not just to kiddos, but also to adults too, that would be there kind of as, the outlookers. I think that'd be very positive. Before I came to Webster, I worked very close to the Normandy School District as a police officer. And, I actually worked secondary up there quite often. And, when I heard about Wesley Bell bringing that on, I thought that was a great idea. And I honestly think it kind of opens it up to where people can start talking, and the kids can kind of understand where police officers coming from, but then also too, police officers understanding kids as well. So I think that'd be awesome.
Chief Curtis, do you think that could happen
Sorry, guys, I had
sometime?
to step away. Like I said,
Oh, what was that?
Yeah, I'm sorry, but yeah, I'll let Fred come on in just a second. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think it's definitely doable, but as Kevin mentioned, that's something we had to partner with the school district on. If they would let us do it, we'd certainly be amenable to. I'm sorry, Fred, go ahead.
Yeah, I think Fred's having some issues. He was texting me earlier. I think it keeps kicking him off. So
I know
he may be,
everybody
he
hear
may
me?
be coming in and out.
We can hear you now, Fred.
Perfect. Sorry, I had to step when my daughter decided to squeeze applesauce.
Fred, are you there?
In the hair, so I had to give her a quick little bath. And said, can you hear me?
Yep.
And you're gone again. We can't hear you.
Aaron's having some problems too. I'm not quite sure what it is, but apparently people are getting kicked on and
Can everybody hear me?
Fred, maybe go out and come back in again.
All right, he just left. He's going to try to get back in.
Yeah.
It was kicking me off a lot too. I'm sitting literally like on top of my Wi-Fi box right now, just trying to.
As we're waiting for Fred to come back, this is just a question, and it may be for next time, but I was thinking about that vehicle stop report. And, I think that there are a lot of questions that are going to come up in the community. And I wonder if there's some way that our board can either anticipate or make sure that either we send a message out that like we're open to feedback, or we're open to discussion, or we're open to Q&A, or I don't know, just like getting ahead of it rather than having folks that might be upset, sort of be like, well, where's the PCEB and all of this? I don't know the answer. I just wanted to ask that question.
We're open to some help and some assistance on doing just that in terms of having dialogue with the community, because like I said, it's very disappointing to me. Like I was expecting to bring back some positive numbers and some positive things, but as you can see, it's not something we have control over. And I know some people in the community will be very concerned about it and probably be upset about it, but it's not indicative of the issues that I think that they're concerned about that go along with it. And if we can just have a conversation, a dialogue as to why that rate is what it is and how it happened, and that it's not necessarily a relationship to profiling, it would be very helpful.
That's a great suggestion, Katie. I mean, that's coming out June 1st. Is that right?
Yes, the state releases a report to the public on June the 1st.
I just even wonder if it's like something that, how our agenda goes ahead of time, we make some room on our agenda saying that there's going to be additional talking about this and open to, attendees,
public comment or something.
Public comments but making that statement proactively versus waiting for it to come in.
Hopefully we have some PR help now, because I think trying to explain this in as simple way as possible is the important thing that is here. And I think come June 2nd, we'll be getting all those questions from places like the Post-Dispatch, and hopefully we've got something simple to explain it. And I have just a couple of ideas, Dale, about some tables, a real simple table that might help.
Yeah, and if you could share that with us, I mean, when anything that you put together, I just think it would be great if you could share that with us, because that helps us have talking points.
Yes.
When we meet with people in the community, or they reach out to us for whatever reason, or, you know, we're in a even a dinner party or something like that, and that happens to come up, I would like to be able to have some talking points to try to help explain it.
You know, Dale, that may be something that we need to think about with Jenny then, is a couple of talking points that we share with
I know she's looking
people on the
at
committee.
drafting a couple things, and I believe I sent what I shared on the screen to Cindy. If
I shared it out. Yeah, everybody has
Yeah.
a copy.
it's not, I mean, that's one of the problems with it, is that over the years especially, and again, I'm not discounting the report,
Mm.
we don't discount it, but over the years, it's kind of led to a grain thought in the people that these are disparity numbers, and if this number is a certain number, your department is profiling, and it's just not an accurate reflection on what reality is. So that when people see that number, it's hard, even when you have a legitimate explanation, to get them away from the thought that it doesn't make any difference how you explain it. It's you're profiling, and that's where there's some difficulty in it. I'm not quite sure how to really simplify it any more than I did, and you know, basically showing that the fluctuations are due to population growth and decline. There's much more of a relationship there to that than it is to the number of stops or to any type of profiling by the officer. So I'm not quite sure how to make that any more simple, but if Mayor, if you're able to come up with something like that, it certainly would be helpful. But I do know that Jenny's has seen it,
Yeah.
is working on some of the things on it that I think will be helpful. But I think it's as important that members of the PCB, I think that everyone here in the community respects your opinion. And again, you don't have to defend the police department. I just would like for people to understand the numbers.
Dale, maybe, you know, I don't know if there's some sort of data or information you can give that kind of speaks to the work you do to prevent and work against profiling. Because sometimes when you're transparent in that manner, you don't have to explain as much about the other, because, you know, it doesn't feel like a cover up. You say that you have very many systems in place to prevent profiling from easily occurring. So maybe if you put that information out, and you know, you're very transparent about that, and the dedication that the Webster Groves Police Department has in not profiling and not having that as part of their practice.
And I can do that. It's one of the problems with that, though, is it's pretty, the policies and procedures themselves are pretty voluminous. So there's a lot of information there. It's in the field training manual. When a new officer comes on, he's assigned a field training officer. So you can see that in training, but again, a lot of material in there. It's the in-service training you get, that's more easily disseminated. And then the culture itself, in terms of, I mean, we show that on the staff agendas, you know, what we talk about, and the way that the department operates as a whole with supervisors and leadership. That's a little more, it's more difficult to disseminate, because you can't really feel that unless you're doing a ride along or unless you're here with, you know, with the officers in the department. You know, the other thing that supervisors do is we have random audits of all the in-car video and of all the body cameras. So every officer is subject to having their behavior reviewed randomly 6 or 7 times every month by their supervisors. So all those things combined, I can kind of put those together, but it's a lot of information.
But what you said just then, Dale, like, go back in this recording, and that's your statement. What you said up to that moment, that's your statement, because you gave it very simply, and it explains that, you know, the supervisors do constantly check on that sort of behavior. So, you know, I think that would make a much more powerful statement, and probably reach the masses better than trying to tease apart all this complicated data. Kevin?
The other thing is the percentages. I mean, when you look at things as a percentage, sometimes you tend to overreact versus looking at like the raw numbers that Chief Curtis shared. You know, in all of 2020, 35 Black residents were stopped. Well, that's 35 in a whole year versus a larger percentage.
Mhm.
So it's really how I think the data can be viewed and explained, and what it really means from a raw numerical standpoint.
I think it's also important to not be defensive about, so I don't know what I mean by that, except to acknowledge that, I was thinking, well, the resident numbers are one thing, but as I was understanding it, the non-resident numbers aren't as good, right? So if I think, well, if I'm Black and my mom is coming to visit me from a different part of town and gets pulled over, I'm still thinking like, that's not fair. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but it doesn't, because what?
Oh yeah, explain.
So-
Okay, help me understand. Yeah.
That's the formula that they're using is a 3.8% Black population in Webster. That's the benchmark for people your mom coming to visit you.
Yes.
The total population of Black drivers coming in and out of Webster Groves, if you use that number, so like I said, the spatial relationship, which is closer to 7%, probably over 7%, brings that number down to the resident number. And that's where someone would look at that higher number and go, well,
Okay, that helped. Thank you. That is clarifying to me. Thank you.
And that's the kind of stuff that I think would help us explain it to others. That exact explanation on why the spatial method is resulting in a more realistic number.
And why can't they use that number?
Well, they could use that number, but as I said, the Professor Decker, who was OMSL, and he I don't remember the other gentleman's name. It was also professor, I think, at St. Louis University, but they put together this formula for the state in 2000 to try and help, because there was a concern about the driving while Black and about there being a percentage where there was Black drivers are being targeted. So they put this together trying to use some kind of practical, rational formula. And theoretically, it looked good because you're using a residential population and municipality. The problem came about, and he acknowledged that in the 2004 when he did the other study where he said the spatial relationship would be much more accurate, in that because it's a metropolitan area, it's using your residential population for everybody coming through skews the numbers. It works for cities who has a larger Black population, but it doesn't work for a city like Webster Groves when you have a 3.8%, especially, but even at a 7%, when you have drivers outside of the city coming in from St. Louis City, which has a 50% ratio, are coming in from Rock Hill, who has a 30% ratio, are coming in from some other city or some other area that has a higher number. So the state could use that. They've never gotten off of those numbers, and I'm not sure there's a good solution to that. It's difficult to institute a change there, and they don't have to deal with the output. I mean, with the results of some of it again, which is why I'm not sure why they chose to use a different data set this year, but it causes concern for people who look at that number. And I don't fault them for that. If you are being told over 20 years that this is an indication of profiling, when you see that number, you're going to correlate it with profiling, and it's just that's not the right perspective. And again, I can't say it's enough. We don't discount it, but it's not an accurate reflection for what our officers are doing in terms of I'm just very confident. And Cindy, you had a good point. I think we can maybe simplify that, be transparent about how we fight against that. But I'm very confident that our officers do not engage in routine profiling. Like I said, I can't guarantee that it never happens with an individual officer, but I can guarantee you that it is not something that's systemic within the department.
Anything else on that? Those are really, Katie, thanks for bringing us back around to that. Moving on to long-term goals. Again, we were looking at that fall event. Kevin is really pushing for us to write a mission, vision, and values. And I think you're right, Kevin. Has one ever been written, a mission statement or anything for this board? That anybody knows?
There's a charge in the ordinance.
Okay.
But,
It's something to think about,
well, it is something.
Yeah, it's actually, I mean, we put one together for the presentations to the community groups. I just think it needs to be modified. It is pretty much straight from the ordinance, and I don't want it to be straight from the ordinance. I want it to have, and it goes back to authenticity, and some of the values that I think we all cherish were some of the things that we discussed at the very beginning of the retreat.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think those are some of the values that we all share as board members, because we respect one another. We respect everyone's opinion. We want to make sure that if someone says something that's inappropriate, that's an ouch moment, and so because we all learn from those kinds of things and those kinds of dialogues and those types of communications. So I think that's the value side where we really want to focus on what are the values that we have. We want to make sure that we help, try to facilitate the trust building and try to facilitate, some of the healing that needs to take place in the Black and Brown community, surrounding policing. We're not necessarily fully community policing, but we're a part of that process. So I just think that needs to be more clear in what we're doing as a board and what our values are.
Also, Mayor Welch met Officer Rogers. He wants Officer Rogers in the neighborhood, but spreading just some good vibes, like we've been talking about earlier. Making sure that we can spread the survey to more people. I can't remember how many were on the survey previously, but while we were talking here, I quickly looked over and we're at 41 respondents. So it's still relatively low. And also making sure we plan a retreat every year. I think that was really good work that we did, to move the needle. So of all that, what can we put on the agenda, something from this on the agenda for next time? I know Chief Curtis is going to bring us a little bit of data. We can look at some of the comments that we have currently from the survey, at that moment right before the meeting. But is there something else that we can put from all of this talk on our next agenda?
How about picking a group of dates for this fall thing?
For the fall thing?
Think about it. Start to pick what we want to do there specifically. I mean, we came up with some ideas. Let's just start. It's not going to get done unless we start breaking it down, I feel.
I agree.
And I really think one of our biggest issues is PR, that people know we're here. They're not going to fill out our survey if they don't know we exist.
Right.
And that's why I feel that it was such an important suggestion to just get us out there, especially into certain areas of the community. And we need to start getting into that.
I agree. Anything else? That's a hefty, that all of that.
Not from our specific goals here, but one thing that came to my mind, Cindy, is that our ordinance is going to be re-examined, right? By city council, and like they'll vote to, or not to
Mhm.
renew our work. And the Alliance for Interracial Dignity sent some thoughts and suggestions about that, I think, to city council and maybe to you and myself and maybe Chief Curtis. But we probably should talk about that next time. I'd like the ordinance and what our thoughts are around that.
So Katie, if I can, just very quickly. Yeah, I don't know where that's going or what kind of changes, if any, will be made. But I do want to assure the board, regardless of what's in the charge, that anytime you have an issue, you have a question about it, you don't have to be concerned about or feel like you don't have the room to maneuver. Asking us if we have an incident that happens or if there's something that publicly is questionable, that I want to be transparent with that. It's important for the PCB board to trust the police department and have an explanation of things that happen. So if you have questions about an incident or performance or whatever it might be, you're not restricted from asking about that. And I am open to talking about any of those things, so that, like I said, regardless of how it's changed or if it's changed, you're always free to do that.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Dale. Mayor, you were, I think you were going to get the survey out to the other board member or the other.
Yeah, we have not done that.
Okay.
Okay, I'm putting that on my to-do list.
Okay.
We will get that out.
Yeah, because we went from 39 to 41. So we need to get the survey out to more people.
We'll do this.
Kevin, did you have another item? I might have missed yours
Okay.
for tonight. You're muted, Kevin.
Muted.
I don't think so. I think
Okay.
Katie kind of touched on it.
Okay.
That what was going on with the city council and the board going forward. So I think that's something that Katie already touched. So.
And I checked for remarks from the visitors. I'll check one more time. Nothing so far. Our next meeting, does somebody have that date? Kevin, you usually are pretty good about it. It's the last Tuesday.
Now you're putting me on the spot.
I'm sorry. It's the last Tuesday of the month. So is that June 29th or?
That is June 29th.
All right.
Yeah, it's the 4th. Let's see, that's 1, 2.
Oh, so that maybe
no,
not,
it's the 20. It's the 22nd.
The 22nd.
The 22nd. It's the 4th Tuesday of each month, and there's 5 Tuesdays in June.
Got it.
So yeah, I've got it on. It's June 22nd.
June 22nd. Is there anything else you'd like to add for the good of the cause?
I don't want to keep you here too much longer. I read Jean's email, and she feels like I wasn't quite sure if she felt like she wanted to remain on the board or not, but that might be something you want to talk to her about and address.
That's right. Jean
just left us.
And she just, so Jean has a lot going on. And I want to support her fully. I know when you got a lot going on, sometimes you have to be strong and say no to some things. So we might need to find someone from the business sector to replace her. So in your travels, keep that in mind. I'll reach out to Jean again and see how she is. Sometimes, you're real stressed and that's the space you're in, but I'll check in on her and see if some calmness has creeped into her life, to see if she can still do it. Certainly we want her support if nothing else, but keep in mind that we may need to find someone to take her place. And I think that's it. Is that it? Okay. Enjoy your evening. I'll enjoy my next 4 hours of principaling kids.
Oh, geez.
Now we'll take a nice and long needed rest.
Best of luck to you tomorrow.
I am gonna need it. I really needed it today, so I'm hanging in there, okay?
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Right.